One of the defining features of politics in the Philippines in the past year is the prominence of the Gen Z or TikTok generation. During the midterm elections earlier this year, the Gen Zs, along with the millennials, were the largest voting bloc. And in many ways, they may have contributed to the surprising results that we saw in the midterm elections, including the success of progressive candidates like Pam Aquino and Kiko Pangilinan in the much vaunted Senate race. More recently, we saw the Gen Zs also playing a very prominent role during the anti-corruption trillion peso march. But what does the Gen Z really think about Philippine politics? What are their preferences and predilections? Are they different from other generations, including the millennials, who were at the center of the anti-PDAF Luneta revolt more than a decade ago? What makes them tick? And in what ways will the Gen Z shape the 2028 elections and the trajectory of Philippine democracy? Do we have credible surveys or numbers to have a better understanding of the Gen Z political mindset? Overall, is Gen Z really a monolithic generation, or is it much more diverse and variegated? To better understand these issues, we have a special guest. Thank you very much, Dr. Garcia, for joining us. I really want to talk about the big picture. I mean, this is a more geopolitical show, but at the same time, you cannot understand the Philippines' place in the world without understanding what is happening in the country.
Correct.
And you cannot understand what's happening in the country if you don't understand
the electoral process
and the demographics. Now, WR Numero, your organization, and by the way, bro, congratulations. You have come a long way. The reason I say bro is because we started having this conversation when we were really just beginning everything, right?
Yeah.
You have come a long way. WR Numero is now one of the most established and authoritative and really referenced survey and analytics agents in the country. Here in TV5 One News, we refer to your works. Now, one of the works you did recently, which really caught my attention, and this is something I've been obsessed about. I don't have an analytics group like you. I just use my own little brain. It's the Gen Z. So what is the algorithm of the Gen Z? What have you found? What are the key findings from your Gen Z special study?
Yeah, thank you, Richard. I'm happy to be here. So at WR Numero, we have two sets of studies. No? The most recent one is our qualitative study, which we call the Filipino Perspectives Digest. It's a qualitative study that focused, its first issue focused on the Gen Zs. We wanted to find out the visions of the future of Gen Zs, how that might affect governance, how that might affect their political behavior and their economic behavior. So there's 5 main findings that we found about the Gen Zs. These are people who are 30 and below, which make up most of the population, the voting population, and the economic labor force of the Philippines. So number one, the Gen Zs actually, they care about their material interests. They care about being able to sustain their lives. They care about jobs. They care about unemployment, which is actually consistent with the broader issues that Filipinos care about, still about material
We went through
depravity.
that during our time,
Exactly. So, the Gen Zs care about those things, care about stability. They care about being breadwinners, because these are the people who are going to be 30 soon. They're at the cusp of their 30s, and they're going to be 30 soon, and these are people...
So you talk to the older Gen Zs in that sense?
Yes. I mean, it's scattered across the younger Gen Zs, the older Gen Zs. But whether or not you're the older or the younger, a big chunk of it they're in their 20s.
Mid-20s.
Mid-20s, even early 20s. So they're just about to enter the workforce, or they've been in the workforce, but they don't see upward mobility that quick. And so they care about, number one, stability, right? Particularly economic and financial stability. Number two...
Can I explain? Sorry, that's very important.
Correct.
Is it because they feel threatened by artificial intelligence, by the precarity of the markets and the ups and downs? Are they stressed because of the news? Where is that obsession with stability coming from?
It's coming from economic opportunities or the lack thereof. It's the ability, it's purchasing power, right? It's the ability to sustain life in urban centers or even in rural centers. And it's the ability to stand, independently on their own, and whether they could do that. In fact, as they grow older. So it's really about. I wouldn't say just finances, but it's about purchasing power. So obviously, inflation will come in, salaries will come in, opportunities for upward mobility, economic upward mobility will come in. So yun yung number one na nakita namin, no? Of course, there's some emotional aspect to it also. that they hope the government could protect them and
You mean
could,
mental health?
more about the emotional dimension of apprehension, diba? They're hopeful, but they're also apprehensive about the future. They know that they could do certain things, but the second finding, in fact,
Right.
they're aware of the structural, systemic barriers to achieving the first goal, which is financial stability. That's why they tend to believe in good governance. They tend to believe in good leadership, right?
Aha. So what you're saying is that they are probably less delusional compared to our generation. We thought, kaya ko yan. Wala akong pake. Even if the system is broken, I'm gonna bulldozer my way through.
That's actually one of the
They
biggest
understand.
findings.
Actually, no, the system is rigged or the system is
There's-
really flawed.
Correct.
We need to fix it so that I can also move up in my life.
Correct.
That's
correct.
so they have that social consciousness and awareness.
They have that social consciousness
wow.
that there are systemic constraints and that they cannot do it on their own. No? So they
by their
need,
boots, by their own bootstraps
parang
alone. Yeah.
they need, they aspire for good governance, they aspire for good political leadership in order to, upend the problem of systemic barriers and constraints. And then, they're also, they like unity and inclusion. They, of course, the issue of the breakup of the Duterte and Marcos tandem.
Polarization.
But yes, that's an issue for them. They hope that it did happen so that we could solve things together. But it also speaks of a bigger issue of inclusion. No? Different religions, different classes, different demographic groups coming together to solve common problems. So by and large, these are the things that people care about. And so they don't necessarily feel good about the breakup of the Duterte-Marcos tandem, or that they do care about good governance. And though it is an issue for them, we suspect, we can hypothesize, it's an issue for them that there's a big corruption.
Shouldn't they be happy that two dynasties that are not necessarily paragons of good governance fighting each other? Or it's an issue of like the stability effect or instability effect it has that could affect their life.
It is about continuity of projects and good political leadership. I think that's what they care about. Caring for developmental outcomes and not petty politics. I think that's where the sentiments of the Gen Zs are. Yeah.
Dr. Garcia, obviously this is where my interest as a political scientist comes in. It's like, okay, so what are the patterns of political affiliation, association, and some would even say partisan alignments we're seeing with the Gen Zs? Do they still like the kind of Duterteismo populist style? Do they like the more reformist, liberal style? Do they like something different, more technocratic, right? So what are they looking at?
Yeah.
What are your numbers telling us?
So outside of the Filipino Perspective Digest, we have what we call the Philippine Public Opinion Monitor, whose volume we aim to release every quarter. We recently just released the post-election sort of study. And in terms of factional partisanship, that's what we call it, factional partisanship. So this is the breakdown. No? Actually, 30% identify themselves. This is at an aggregate, not the youth. No, at an aggregate, 30% identify themselves as Duterte supporters.
Across all demographics.
30% identify themselves as independent or none of the above. And then around 20% identify themselves as liberal progressive.
Oh, liberal progressive.
20%. So that's perhaps the base of the pink and progressive bloc. And then around 15% identify themselves as pro-Marcos or pro-administration.
So the administration is the most minority?
It is the smallest, actually.
Oh,
it's just around 15%. No?
This is the loyalist base.
This is the loyalist base.
Interesting.
Correct.
Well, but there's almost a quarter to a third who are like non-affiliated.
Exactly. So that's I think these will be the swing. No, of course, as the elections will come closer, they will have to choose sides. Sometimes you shrink that number, but sometimes it also expands. It splinters into many different support groups and factional partisanships. So the point is, it might disperse to Marcos, it might disperse to Duterte, it might disperse to to the progressives.
Or
And so
they might just opt out of politics. Is that also possible?
or they might sit it out. That's also
Right.
possible. So
Just
we have to look
cynical.
at that 30%. In fact, they're the biggest, slightly the bigger group. And we'll look at the numbers more specifically. But roughly, it's around 30% independent, 30% Duterte. And then you have Marcos and you have progressives, almost maybe just a 4% difference. And if you look at that by age group, no,
Uh-huh.
31% are still pro Duterte. No? And so what that tells us, in the 2025 elections, we don't have exit polls.
Yeah.
So it is hard for us to conclusively say.
Although we
that-
promised to have it in the next election here in TV5 One News. Because we
that's
had it in
fantastic.
2016. Yeah,
You
yeah.
need that. Kailangan
Yeah.
yan para alam
Yeah,
natin
yeah.
sino talaga yung binoto nila. No? Kasi
Exactly.
ngayon, nanguhula lang tayo. No? And we can just do conjectures and hypotheses.
Pwede pa explain Dr. Garcia, bakit mahalaga yung exit polls? Anong pagkakaiba ng exit polls sa surveys?
Yung exit poll kasi ginagawa yan right nung election day mismo.
So, alam mo mismo ano
alam
talagang
natin,
binoto niya, hindi
alam
lang
natin
yung preference.
Kung sino yung binoto. In fact, that's used to confirm, diba, the integrity of elections,
Right.
by independent groups. So NAMFREL used to do it, but that's a couple of
Cycles
elections
back,
ago. In
yeah.
fact, we're talking to NAMFREL. Like we see Eric Alvio, we've been speaking since 2023 of the possibility of doing an exit poll. But the reason why it's difficult to do an exit poll is because you need a sizable respondent
Like
base.
30,000?
10,000 minimum,
At least,
so up
yeah.
to 30,000.
Yeah.
Tapos, it's a difficult,
And expensive, I
very
suppose.
expensive
Right.
logistical undertaking. No? So, kaya hindi siya ginagawa lagi. But it's good that if, groups, independent groups, civil society groups,
Yeah.
they invest in those things, mas tataas yung belief ng tao sa elections natin, sa integrity. But absent that, it's also difficult to find out, makita talaga kung anong nangyari right after elections. We can do a study, a few weeks after elections, such as what we did. But at the same time, parang we won't necessarily conclusively say that these were the actual numbers. Yung COMELEC data rin kasi, the other thing, COMELEC data does not give you the demographic breakdown. They only give you location. They don't give you age.
So
they
how
don't
come
give
they
you
said that this is the one that majority is yung Gen Z and...
sa registration. That's before the
but
day
the turnout
itself.
is not true. Can't
Hindi
you...
mo malalaman yung... you can,
You can, right? Like
you can
person X
triangulate.
voted, then his
You can
age...
triangulate, but there's no system to do that
So
correctly.
so they have not triangulated that.
Yeah.
But you can do that, right?
You can do that hypothetically, but it's a
privacy
huge...
law, you need the information.
I think it's more of a data analytics issue, whether we have the software, the system to do that, to match who actually voted, diba? Among the people who registered. We don't know what the
Interesting.
turnout is.
So we're
And
still
who
doing a
actually-
lot of conjectural analysis here.
Yeah. So, kaya
Interesting.
ibig sabihin, Richard,
Okay.
parang, therefore, hindi natin pwedeng sabihin na necessarily kaya nanalo si Bam at nanalo si Kiko ay dahil sa
Sa youth
Gen
vote.
Zs or sa youth vote.
It's too conjectural.
It's still a hypothetical,
Yeah.
unconfirmed hypothesis. So, in fact, the data tells us otherwise. It tells us that 31%, in fact more, 36%, almost 40% are of the Gen Zs, of the youth, are pro Duterte. If the elections were held today, and therefore the factional partisanship, the way the architecture of the partisanship currently, a huge part of it are still supporting the Duterte coalition.
Going back to the exit poll in 2016, we did it here, TV5 One News with SWS.
Okay.
I remember very well, it was also very counterintuitive. Although it shouldn't have been if you're not prejudiced against us millennials. Like, oh, these millennials, they were not born during martial law. They're ignorant. They don't know about... Except when the exit poll came in, the ones who voted more for BBM, representation of the Marcos era, most of them were people who should have known it because they lived through it. These are people who are Gen X and above. Millennials voted more for Lenny. And in fact, there were the difference. So now you're saying is that come 2025, actually, interestingly, it may
Baka hindi
not
ganon.
be the case that the youth is making the difference in favor of, siguro, we can say Bam is kind of a proxy
Yeah.
for Lenny, right?
Yeah.
Similar
Yeah.
brand. He
Yeah.
literally worked for her as a campaign manager. But that brings me to 2022 because I remember the Pulse Asia survey in 2022, pre-election survey, said that the Gen Zs were the strongest supporters of unity. demographically speaking, or at least 70-80%. So actually, your number tracks.
Yeah, it's
that,
actually...
that actually malakas yung Duterteismo, for the lack of term, well, it is not it is the term we're using, sa Gen Z.
And if that's the argument, di ba, na Gen Zs nga ang nagpanalo, sabihin natin kay Bam, nag-number one si Bongo eh.
So mas nagpanalo pa sila
In
kay
fact,
Bongo.
baka mas
and
dumami pa yung Bata.
was slightly behind Bam. So actually, it could be Bongo and Bam.
Too.
And Marcoleta was just within the range, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
So ibig sabihin, ang lesson dyan, hindi homogeneous itong Gen Z vote. No?
Hindi lang yun. Hindi mo rin nakuha if you think you're pink
hindi mo
actually nakuha. Baka if anything, it's more nakuha ng kabila.
Yes, potentially. Potentially, but we won't know that. Kasi wala tayong exit poll.
Kaya nga proxy lang ginagamit natin for election of 2022, post-election. These are all proxies.
And then ito survey.
Exactly. These are all proxies. Sir, this got me worked up because...
And even yung 30% na independent, malaki din kasi yung independent eh.
And gaano kalaki dun sa 30%
parang wala dun sa party. They don't identify themselves with either of the three factions. And so they're independent. Hindi natin
But what are they looking for?
Well,
what kind of candidate could win them over?
Pwedeng mag-disperse doon sa liberal, pwedeng part din sila nitong bumoto kay Bongo. And sa Senate kasi, di ba, you can choose more than one. Diba? So
12,
parang,
exactly.
You can even choose a combination of number 1 to 3, all Duterte votes, and then bigla ka nag-pink and liberal.
So nag-a la carte ka.
Pwede kang mag-a-la-carte. Exactly,
but you cannot do that in presidential elections. You choose one, right? Which is a completely different dynamic.
Completely different. And so it matters now how big are those who identify with you, because that's your base. These are the people who, you won't shrink anymore. That will remain potentially stable at 30%, and therefore these are the people you will bank on, where you will draw your votes for 2028.
Dr. Garcia, this is a very important conversation, and I really thank you for this, because I think a lot of wishful thinking has been happening a lot.
Maybe that's the right way to...
I think there has been a lot of overreading the data also, I would say, or even the wrong data being used as a reference point. So isn't your findings, if I can put it that way, kind of a warning to forces of progressive liberalism, even to, of course, the loyalist vote, that far from showing a potential break in our political alignment landscape, we're actually seeing a continuity of popularity of the Duterteismo brand here. And that if things stand, we might as well prepare for another Duterte. Isn't that what the data is kind of implying here?
The data implies that, yes. And so you can't necessarily bank on the youth, but you can't assume that that's your base. You can't assume, because the difficulty is you become complacent. But the truth is you actually need to campaign even more, diba? To get the youth on your side.
Or delusional even.
Or if you... and then, that's the problem. You won't anymore campaign to the youth, diba? With the youth, and bringing them into your side. The tendency is you already assume that they're on your side, but the truth is the data doesn't support that. So I mean, there are other reasons, therefore.
Sure.
Demographic reasons that are determinants of the victory of Bam and Kiko, and you have to find out what exactly that is. But what we're saying is that the data does not support that it is the youth. It could be geographic, it could be gender or sex, or it could be other demographics.
Let's start with the geographic, because one of the things that really explains the endurance of Duterteismo is solid South.
Mindanao, correct.
This is a completely new phenomenon. Now, both of us have Ilocano background.
Yeah.
We have been familiar with the solid North phenomenon for a very long time. Sometimes it has been exaggerated. Sometimes it has been proven to be more of a mirage.
Yeah.
But I look at every single data point since 2016. It is not mirage when it comes to Solid South. Solid South is one thing that will make certain candidates automatically competitive in any national elections. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, malaki pa rin yung Mindanao as a source of votes. It's still at least 1/4 or at least 1/3, go up to 1/3.
But if you solidify that,
if you solidify
immediately gives you a bump, right?
Kasi if they vote homogeneously, which they do since
right?
2016,
exactly. Unlike the rest of the country,
So actually, magandang data point yan na discuss, Richard, yung difference ng soft and hard votes. Apakadaming hard votes ng Duterte. And so
Yun
we
yung
have to unpack the
hardcore
sources.
talaga,
Hardcore
yeah.
talaga.
Yeah.
Compared with the others, soft votes. So pwede pang mag-iba yung utak nila.
Yeah.
Ang hard votes kasi, yung base nila, napaka-solid. And the way they manifest the intensity of that support is also different. Diba? So, although hindi pa nagre-revolution, hindi pa nila ina-oust si Marcos and others, but makikita mo dito na, at
Yeah.
least for these elections, homogeneous silang, para silang medyo cult-ish nga eh.
I've been
Diba?
at The Hague multiple times. I've seen it.
Yeah.
I mean, they called
Nag-block
me.
vote sila. Diba? They only vote for just the Duterte
Find me
candidates.
any other Filipino leader that goes abroad and then people are willing to picnic there for weeks in support of that president. I cannot think of a single Filipino president who has
I think
that.
there
Never.
really just is an emotional attachment to Duterteism as an idea. And therefore, yun nga, we need to understand saan ba nanggagaling yun? What are the drivers of Duterteism? Why is it so strong? Diba? Why is it so difficult to unravel? And it seems like the more that the Marcoses are doing what they're doing, the more that you strengthen pa nga. You reinforce the Duterte narrative. And so, yeah, so these are things that we need to watch out for
With your
2028.
colleague, Professor Cliff Arguelles, I mean, I've been working, I have a couple of pieces for Journal of Democracy, right? And,
Yes.
and he's working on something also along those lines. And for me, this is almost identity politics now.
Pwede.
It's like, I am Duterte.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Correct.
Like when you criticize Duterte, you're insulting the identity of that person. I, of course, had an unfortunate experience of getting a sense of that when some people
tama yan.
misconstrued my idea,
It's-
my explanation of, let's say, human development index differentials.
That's a very good actually hypothesis, Richard. Kasi nung una, sabi nila the clamor for Duterte was because of the failure of neoliberalism, diba? The failure of neoliberalism as expressed through the Liberal Party to deliver material,
Inclusive development, bad
good governance,
infrastructure,
and
yeah.
things like that. Pero hindi pala, no? It's beyond then the material aspects of support, but more on the ideational or the social
Or both.
constructive ideation.
Because, again,
Or
I
could
know I'm
be
going to
both
make,
too.
again, enemies, but I already made this comparison. If you look at the MAGA movement, right? The vote for Trump was really a rejection of that globalizing liberal idea, right? Which led to outsourcing, led to decline of manufacturing, the China shock. And then Trump turned it into some sort of personality cult, some would say, or support for his idea of America first. So you could see this kind of a mutation, that something started as a rejection, and then dialectically the negation of the negation became identity politics. This is my running idea, basically, on this. So we went from a classic Marxist kind of a critique to now, dude, this is like identity politics. Again, I understand because I have relatives who, until today, believe that Marcos Sr. was the best president ever, right?
No, my
And
dad
they will-
thinks like that too.
Well, let's not. I said relatives, so it's not my mom and dad. Just to be clear, right? I don't know about the titas and all. So I always understood it very instinctively. That's identity politics to me. Like Marcos, Ilocanos, we're one, right? Of course, it doesn't apply to me, and that's why I always said to our Mindanaoan friends, you can be angry at Imperial Manila. That doesn't mean you have to automatically support the Duterte, right? Or like. You are from Mindanao, you shouldn't be defined by Duterte.
Pero Duterte is the best representation for them of being
Because he's the most
Mindanaoan.
successful. No, it is the first ever Mindanaoan president.
And babalik din tayo sa 2016, Richard. In fact, you pointed it out. Ang mga bumoto kay Duterte, marami sa ABC din. Right?
We saw
And
that in
until
the
now.
exit polls.
And until
The
now,
most
mataas yung
educated.
support. Exactly. So
Is
it's
that
not
what it
because-
also shows you? That the Gen Z with the higher educational standards are the one also likely more...
Not necessarily,
not
but they're one of the biggest.
One of the
One
biggest
of the
again.
biggest. Oh,
So that's the Bobotante myth.
yeah, exactly. So ibig sabihin, the roots are
fallacy.
not necessarily anymore economic. Diba? So
Right.
the root now, the argument becomes that, yeah, it is identity. It is that they have an emotional affinity, a cognitive affinity to the ideals of Duterteismo, beyond just about money. And the idea that, or results, diba? Yun yung economic results.
My read of that, after this conversation, right? My read of that, based on my own research, book on Duterte and everything else, is it really started as aspirational middle class thing. Because if you look at it, Duterte is someone who made it big, but didn't necessarily come from poverty. He came from a, let's say, semi-periphery of politics, right? A big dynasty, but not from Imperial Manila or Luzon, right? And I think a lot of middle-class, upwardly mobile Filipinos can naturally relate to that.
Yeah.
But this is where I think the research of people like Dr. Walden Bello comes in, looking at the case of Chile, Thailand, more recently in Brazil. I would even say in Turkey to a certain degree. This idea that you need also a strong man to protect our newly created wealth, the new cell phone I bought, the new car I have, because my drugista,
Potentially.
my criminal. You get what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
there's also this law and order.
Support for strong state.
Exactly.
Oo.
Penal, we call
Yeah.
it penal populism, right? So I think that's also another important topic.
Si Dan Slater, may sinulat dyan, yung doctoral dissertation niya, yung sabi niya basically, yung question niya kasi is, when do elites work together?
This
when
is
do
professor
they,
from Michigan University.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, yung
Michigan.
ordering power. So,
Yeah.
ang sabi niya, if there's an imminent physical threat to property, that's when the elites actually work together. No, and therefore support the state and strengthen the state.
Right.
Oh, maraming
Yeah, I think this
permutations
was I had a Cambridge University book version of that, if I'm not
it's
mistaken.
called-
Yeah.
I think
came
so.
across
Oo.
that.
So,
And-
similar dyan sa argument mo.
Right, and the other argument is that actually we're seeing this across the region. Prabowo Subianto also
Yeah,
run on a
supported
very
by-
similar
supported by
law
the elites.
and order.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing here is this kind of a crystallization of Duterteismo, right? Whereby the reason I'm saying that is because I think we have a lot of liberal friends, especially, thinking fluke yan. That was a freak accident.
Yeah.
That
Pero
Dutertes
hindi
are just
pala.
some crazy people who would come and then will.
Yeah.
And then they're beginning to realize what our American friends are realizing. Trump is not going to go away. MAGA is here to stay.
Yes.
I think Duterteism is here to stay.
And the data talks about that too, Richard. In fact, 2022, we've been saying, 2022 is a continuity election. People voted for Marcos.
But
on his own
Sarah
merit,
played a big role
on his
there.
own merit, but also
Because
because
of Sarah, yeah.
of Sarah. And then people feel that Marcos is the best representation of Duterte Sr. We have that data. Like, it's almost 90% of people feel that they're not dissatisfied with status quo, that they want to continue the Duterte administration. So whoever won, kaya nga medyo si Isko naging pro-Duterte, whoever will win, whoever
Well,
won
I call him
basically,
Duterte Light.
Duterte Light, Duterte 2.0, is
Yeah.
who best represented Rodrigo Duterte in 2022. And that's why you had a landslide. So sinama mo yung mga people who wanted to support Duterte, plus yung Marcos pa, kaya nagkaroon ng ganong kalaki na resulta for Bongbong Marcos. Although ngayon, because of the unity team na nag-break up, hindi na ganun yung data. But just to say that, tama, it's not an accident. It's not a blip, you know, in this whole historical continuity. This is actually a revolutionary sort of punctuated equilibrium moment, diba? That
A
really,
realignment.
yeah, a realignment.
A
Diba?
realignment.
That punctuated the political equilibrium that has long been, for the past decades, has long been dominated by liberal progressives. So we will have to live with this. And I think that's also the 2028 story. It seems like that's the 2025 story, and that's the 2028
Let's
story.
talk about, before we throw in the towel, you do boxing, so you know what. If you are the non-Duterte people,
Meaning Marcos and independent Lenny.
and Len, basically that's 60-70%. That is not solidly behind Duterte,
Yeah.
right? Although my contention is, if you look at the Octa numbers, it looks like the Duterte solid base is probably more like 15-20%, but it has an elasticity of up to 40% plus.
Okay.
So there's some
Similar.
slight variations. Anyway, going back to this, let's say for the sake of argument, 30% pwede corner nung kabila, meaning the Dutertes, which automatically makes Sara Duterte or whoever represent them as the front runner, which is what everything shows. Then what is your strategy if you're on the other side? One thing I can say is that the only way you can be competitive is that you join forces, right?
You join forces, that's one.
I just don't see any other way, right? Like each of them, let's say admin runs Vince Dizon, or who knows, General Torre will
Why-
make a
why
Phoenix
do you think
comeback,
Vince Dizon is the-
right? Now, let's just say for a second,
Standard
like
bearer.
who's the kind of BBM, right? Sandro is too young to run for that.
No, that's Andrew.
And then let's say the other side runs Lenny. Each of them, say, 10, 15 million maximum. I mean, I'm even being optimistic about. You're up against someone who can get 20, 25, 30 million.
Yeah.
It's not even
Yeah.
close.
Yeah. So I think yung una, tama ka. No? So yung una is just prevent intra-factional splintering. Ibig sabihin, di ba, so yung one faction is liberal progressives, but they can't even decide.
Yeah, like
Decide.
Riza
Sino
Lenny.
ba?
Riza Lenny is the best
Risa,
example. That
Lenny,
debate.
Bam, di ba?
Right.
You know, ang dami nila. They can't figure it out.
So they have to consolidate.
They have to consolidate. They cannot splinter.
Yeah.
And that's what happened in 2022. Di ba? nag-consolidate yung Duterte Marcos, nag-splinter sila into four. Si Ping, si Isko, si Lenny, pati si Pacquiao. Pero sa totoo lang, nung una, 2021, yung isang bayan, they were trying to, di ba, lump them all together in one. In fact, standard bearer dapat si Isko, VP ulit si Lenny, or the other
Or
way
something
around.
like that.
Something like that.
And then what
But
happened is that they
broke
all
down.
attack Lenny.
Oh, and that breaks down. And then they all ran again.
They all attack Lenny. That's what
hati
happened.
yung boto. Diba? So, tama ka. So, well, number one, intra-factional. Tapos, they also have to have a grand coalition. So, yun yung pangalawa. May pangatlo. Baka kailangan basagin yung boto ng Duterte.
Third is you hope there'll be a split on the other side.
Maybe you work on it actively. I don't know what they can do to do that.
Well, I mean, honestly, well, let's call it for what it is. Everyone's looking at Bongo. If you're Bongo right now, you have
Bongo.
every reason to think of the next.
Number one, 26 million votes. Si Bam is almost 21 million. So that's a big, big difference sa second place. So, laki yun.
And Bongo, you know, when he was on TV5 during the elections here, we were just back to back with each other, and I listened to his side. I think he was listening to my side once I came in. I was joining from Budapest back then. He was basically saying, I mean, I could be wrong, but he's basically saying he could have run actually back in 2022, and it wouldn't have been the most difficult race to win because he had the backing of the most
popular president
in history. And in the end, it was a dynamic. We don't have to go into House of Zimmerman and House of Hanil, whatever.
He could have won, actually, kung hindi tumakbo si Sara nun. He could have won. Tapos si Rodrigo
I don't think
Duterte
even
yung
BBM
vice
would have run.
president.
I think if Sara didn't run, or Sara ran for VP together with Bongo, honestly, I think BBM would not have run because it would be too tough for him after losing already 26
And he
elections.
was consistently in the top six, the upper half of the Senate races that he was part of.
Yeah.
Diba? So may, of course, some base pa rin niya. So sa Duterte, base pa rin. Oh, but yeah, he again, you know, may chance siya in the sense na he could be the standard bearer
If Sara doesn't
if
run.
Sarah doesn't run.
But I don't see him
but I
running
think,
against Sara. I don't think it will
Oh,
work.
well, yun yung, siguro, if ikaw yung liberal progressive or Marcos
That's
camp,
what you want.
Dapat sirain mo into three, di ba? At the very least, weaken the stronghold of Sara in Mindanao. Kasi doon nagko-concentrate yung votes.
Let me circle back again to your research because it's important. We're already talking about
2020.
what should be game plan exactly. If what you're saying is that like concern for people is pragmatic concerns with jobs and all of that, law and order, etc., then what should be the messaging campaigning strategy of a non-Duterte candidate because you can, otherwise, what is it? Who's the most Duterte among the candidates? Is it going to be like variations of Duterteismo? So how can you compete with Duterte given the lay of the land? Is there a way they can compete with Duterte?
I think perennial talaga nag-attract sa botante is yung practical solutions and results, no? Material solutions and results, or at least a strong aspirational narrative na magagawa ko yan based on my track record. Kaya nga malakas yung support kay Duterte din dahil nagawa ko yan before, kaya kong gawin yung drugs. You know, I can solve bigger problems, no? Traffic, 'di ba? Or pandemic or whatever. You know, just give me a chance.
Mr.
Ganun yun,
Solution, yeah.
Oo, kaya ko yan eh. Kaya ko yan. Kaya nga siguro nag-resonate ngayon si Vince Dizon. Kasi he's thought, or he's seen as a solutions person. He has not, just technocratic aspirations, no political aspirations. So I think that will resonate. That always will resonate. And I feel that sila Bam din nag-resonate. Dahil si Bam,
Exactly.
you know, education, you know, really
Practical,
daily
gut-ish.
concerns. I think you really have to build around that. You know, that I have a solution to economic depravity, and I can actually do it, no? Based on my track record. So I think they will have to converge around that. But then, you know, issues such as human rights can also be, you know, tackled. Issues such as the West Philippine Sea.
But you nest it in that
you
more
need to connect it to something more
To
you
be
know,
relatable.
nuanced and granular to the material realities of people.
Last part, and this is very important. Obviously, Vico Soto comes to our mind. Per our constitution, he'll be months short of being qualified. There's a push as we speak in the Congress to bring down the age, and I'm sure certain people will support it because they might want someone like Vico Soto to run. I don't know. Some surveys say Vico could be very competitive as early as 2028, but everyone sees him at the very least as someone to look up to for now, and who knows, I don't know, 34 or whatever. The Vico Soto model is interesting, right? Because it ticks all the boxes. There's clearly the good governance element to that, and along with Mayor Magalong, he has been taking up the cudgels in terms of exposing all of these flood control projects, scandals, allegedly corruption even within media, etc. But Vico is also a guy who understood you need infrastructure, you need practical issues, you need to have socialized housing, you need to fix the city hall. At the same time, he also has, I don't know, I won't say Duterte style, but he has...
He's not weak, he's strong.
Now, he is having this kind of a, exactly, pugilistic style. Medyo bumabanat siya. Parang banat by Vico.
Totoo yan. Even in 2020, itong last year, di ba yung mga contractors, di ba, hindi sinunod, walang permit.
Pinupuntahan niya, inaaway-away niya.
Niya.
Yung mga hakot na mga boss, alam ko, hindi ka taga dito, taga QC ka. So,
Soto brand yan eh. Di ba, matatapang.
Exactly.
Matatapang sila. So,
isn't that probably a potential non-Duterte alternative? That you combine a good government? Because remember, Vico always says, ang idol niya is Jesse Robredo, right? Yung participatory democracy, participatory budgeting. So that's more like a standard progressive liberal position. But Vico also has this kind of a charismatic, strong leader, right?
Correct.
Plus the celebrity Itbulaga factor, right? Can that be a kind, if not, obviously, as I said, Vico himself may not be able to run, but can that be something that a non-Duterte candidate could work around for an anti-Duterte challenge in 2028?
Definitely. I think, with the moment that we're talking about flood control, and si Vico kasi specifically, di ba, he's against the issue of corruption in infrastructure, no? So, if that conversation becomes sustained until next year, then perhaps, he could be a candidate.
Or pwede buhay-buhayin niya every 6 months.
Pwede buhay-buhayin niya. So, pwede yan. Pero I really don't have anything else to say about that. Kasi, he said he's not running in the next elections. And, perhaps that, it seems like he does, he doesn't break his promises unless they're, very special cases. But I don't know. Matagal na rin kinaklamor na si Vico tatakbo eh. In fact, sa Senate kaso hindi niya tinuloy.
Right.
So, pwede. My answer is pwede. Pwede, syempre. No? Alternative, young voices na malinis, na matapang. No? And ito nga, may Soto brand. May national brand si Vico, di ba? Yung tito niya. And then yung tatay din niya. So, pwede yan. He has a...
I think it's more his grandfather na idol niya. The late senator, the journalist one. That one was really special guy.
Pwede rin. So, yes. Pwede.
On that
is that your answer?
No. We're looking at the lay of the land. And thank you so much, Dr. Garcia, for that very comprehensive, and I would say still cautiously hopeful discussion about the direction of Philippines, because why not? Do it all. Be strong, be clean, be progressive, and be a man of solutions. Catch us again next week here on One News. You can also check out the long conversation on Spotify and YouTube. I am Richard Heydarian, and that was The View from Manila. We're One News, all sides, all the time.